Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dale and Season 3 content is now finally officially here. This means the gear grind has just restarted for yet another season with so many ways for you to be able to outfit your main and your alt characters, from delve content, dungeon content, new open world activities, raids, as well as PvP. And for this video, for the Season 3 content update, I did want to go over all of the fastest and the best methods for you to be able to gear out a character in the Season 3. I think ideally it is best to do everything, delves, dungeons, raids, especially at the start of the season to get as much gear as humanly possible. But even if you're someone who just wants to focus on one specific activity, I will have some tips on how to maximize that activity when it comes to gear gains, currency upgrades, and much more. This is kind of a long video, but I am going to put chapter marks down below so you can skip around to whatever section that's most relevant to you. And as always, if you guys want to see more guides for the patch 11.2, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. Now, I'm going to go over the different gearing methods by basically segmenting all of the gearing opportunities through its own categories, starting with open world content. And for the most part, open world content when it comes to competitive and game gearing, it's not going to be the greatest. A lot of the weekly quests and world events can offer you upgrade gear, starter items that can be as high as veteran track, which are a good starter and is definitely worth doing, like the weekly quests within Dornagal, as well as all the other side activities like the theater troop, the Hollow Fall, spreading the light event, doing the events with Ashka Head, doing the tower defense minigame in Gundagraz, all of these things, and there's going to be an extra bonus one in Koresh as well. All of those things are definitely worth doing for that weekly box. It won't be great for gear specifically, as it doesn't really have a lot of best in slot items, but it has a lot of currencies that you're going to be using this season. Like delve keys, for example, in order to be able to get better gear from delves, but also currencies like Valor Stones and Crests in order to upgrade all of your gear. And even the special assignments, which are going to be available once in a while within certain regions where you have to complete a certain amount of world quests before you can access them. These are also worth doing, as the caches from these are also really good for those same currencies, as well as coffer key shards to get you even more keys for delves for the week. Then, of course, we can't forget about the Rational Roll boss, which actually has been nerfed due to popular demand. They made this one just a little bit easier to get through, and the gear that it drops is still going to be champion track. It is random what you get, like you could be a rogue looking for a leather piece, and you could potentially get cloth and plates, but the items are warbound to your account, so all of your alts can potentially use them. So it's definitely at least worth trying your weekly luck with Rational to see what items you can get from the world boss. Outside of this, you should definitely try to see if you could do any world activities in order to at least pick up the quest to be able to upgrade your Reishi Cloak Wrap. Now, to do so, you will need to collect 3 threads for the week in order to be able to take your cloak to a higher rank, with it capping out at rank 5. One of the ways to be able to get one of those cloak strands is actually by doing warrants within Koresh, which is part of the open world phase diving activities. It's one of the many different activities that could potentially drop you a thread, or rather a strand, for your Reishi Wrap, but also other endgame content from delves, dungeons, raids, and PvP all can drop you strands, so it's not necessarily part of the open world content, but you'll definitely want to pick up the quest for it every single week from the Zone of Koresh whenever you get your weekly resets. Besides open world content, another activity that I think is actually very efficient for early gearing is delves, since you can just dive into delves without having to wait for groups or pugging anybody. You and your trusted companion brand can immediately get into delves and start collecting some fairly decent gear. Starting at tier 8, and tier 8 is where you should basically do the lowest difficulty of delve if you can help it. Tier 8 is where you can get a bunch of champion track, 684 item level pieces, which is fantastic, plus a lot of rune crests as well. But if you actually take delves all the way up to the highest difficulty of tier 11, you should try to do at least 3 tier 11s for the week, because, well, the drops themselves are still going to be champion track, but instead of collecting rune crests, you can actually get gilded crests instead, with up to 21 crests that you can get from the weekly cap from the 3 tier 11 delves. While running through delves, you also have a chance to either encounter on the nemesis of this season, or potentially stumble on Shrieking Quartz, which is an item used to force summon a nemesis to your location inside of a delve. And this allows you to fight that nemesis to get yourself a map from delves. Maps will give you a guaranteed hero track item from at the end of the delve run, depending on the difficulty, but like starting at tier 8 and above, it's at least a hero track guarantee. However, if you're trying to really maximize your maps, ideally you should be using your maps on a tier 11 delve, because then not only do you get a hero track item, but you'll actually will get bonus gilded crests from the week from your delves, getting you up to maximum of 31 gilded crests just for running delve content. However, they've also added yet another way for you to be able to get even more gear from delves. Once you unlock rank 3 throughout your delve's journey, at rank 3 you'll be able to get an ethereal visit buff, where Dalaran will now appear at the end of a tier 9 delves and above, and will allow you to purchase delve trinkets from him. These trinkets won't be anything amazing by any means. They will be champion tier or champion track quality trinkets. However, the way the Blizzard has tuned a lot of the delve trinkets, they usually tune them to be really high, just to make sure the delve gear actually has some viability when it comes to endgame. Trinkets in particular, at least some of them, are generally some of the strongest trinkets in the game. And if you can get them on champion track, or better yet, hero track, those could potentially be some of the best items that can compare with mythic raiding and dungeon trinkets to some degree. So being able to get at least some of those best in slot trinkets guarantee from a trinket vendor, even on champion track, can at least help out so many of your mains and even alls to at least have a really solid item to head into this brand new season. And gives you yet another opportunity for delves to be an excellent source of even some guaranteed gear for the season as you get your way through the seasonal progression. And outside of delves, we also have the fan favorite Mythic Plus dungeons. However, the Mythic Plus season for Season 3 is getting a bit of a shakeup. As part of the seasonal dungeons, we have one mega dungeon that's making a return for the season, and that dungeon is Tezavesh. However, they're doing something special for Tezavesh because they want to be able to recreate that original release mega dungeon experience of Tezavesh. And when it released back in Shadowlands, very similar to previously released mega dungeons, Tezavesh had a hard mode that allowed you to get better gear rewards, especially from the final boss. And they're basically making Tezavesh, they'll market the not Mythic Plus version, like the +2, +4 Keystone difficulty. The base difficulty is automatically a hard mode difficulty. This means the bosses within this dungeon are going to be naturally harder from the get-go, scaled to be essentially on a +10 difficulty keystone, so you're going to want a bit of item build before you can tackle this difficult adventure. However, you won't have to deal with a Mythic Plus affix system or timer system whatsoever. You could just make your way through the dungeon as slowly as you want to and kind of treat it as a 5-man group, like as a mini raid with its own form of progression. The bosses are going to be harder, and they're even going to have some extra mechanics additionally on top of it to make them a little more challenging, but it gives you plenty of time in the world in order to be able to complete it with some worthwhile loot, as the dungeon baseline will drop hero track items all across the board for every one of these bosses. However, Tezavesh hard mode was also special because you can get a bonus reward for completing the entirety of the dungeon without a single death. So if you can complete a full deathless run all the way to the final boss of Solia, you actually will be rewarded with mythic track gear from the final boss instead. So potentially you can get some very strong items at the end of the run. Plus, I'm pretty sure the deathless run back in the day awarded you with a mount as well. And this is going to be something that will be made a little bit easier throughout the season as you get better gear, because you'll have a lot more health, a lot more armor, a lot more better trinkets, better survivability, and you'll be able to kill bosses really quickly. So surviving and doing a deathless run will be really easy by the end of the season. But at the very beginning, if you can muster together a group that just knows these dungeons and can play through a proper deathless run at the start of the season, this can award you a ton of gear. It is also assumed, since Tezavesh is going to be ran as a +10 equivalent difficulty, that it should still drop you a keystone that's at least of a +10 quality, or around that level. So this should be ideally your very first dungeon. If it does drop a keystone, should be ideally your very first dungeon of the season. Sometimes they change how things work from PTR to live, but if this thing still drops a keystone, definitely should do Tezavesh as your very first dungeon, because you could potentially be walking out with a much higher level keystone in order to start up your season's gearing Mythic Plus journey. Outside of that, Mythic Plus dungeons are still an excellent form of gear, and there's a good chance you've been running a bunch of Mythic Zeros in order to get really good loot, such as a bunch of champion track gear as well as carved crests. But dungeons from +2 to +5 difficulty award you champion track and rune crests instead for even greater item level upgrades. +6 dungeons will start award you hero track gear and rune crests, so even better items for you to be able to upgrade along the way. And +7s is that sweet spot where dungeons are not the most difficult, but award you hero track and gilded crests on top of it, which are easily farmable. And any dungeons above a +7 will award you even more gilded crests, but the items are still going to be hero track, just on a slightly higher item level. Ideally, at the start of the season, especially if you're just trying to farm up as many gilded crests for the season, you want to get as many +7 difficulty dungeons spammed out because they're the easiest. They can award you hero track gear, which is the highest gear you can get from spam running dungeons, and help you catch up on all of your gilded crests for the week. However, for the Great Vault purposes, you still do want to do dungeons on a +10 and above difficulty in order to help fill out your Great Vault slots. So +10, ideally in 1 slot or even in 2 slots, so 4 dungeons if you can muster those, would be ideal at the start of the season, because this means you can start potentially getting some mythic item level drops from your Great Vault. However, we'll come back and talk more about the Great Vault in just a little bit. Now, the next thing we talk about is gearing through the new Omega Manaforge Omega Raid, which is going to have different type of gear rewards depending on the difficulty of dungeons that you're doing. Like LFR will drop you veteran track equivalence gear for all of your boss pickups. Normal will start to drop you champion track gear. Heroic will start to drop you hero track gear, and Mythic will drop you the highest level of Mythic track quality. So ideally, the higher of difficulty on the raid you go to, the better the gear versions are going to be. And many of the different bosses within the Manaforge Omega Raid also sometimes have bonus drops. Like for example, Soulbind and Nazrin just has a cosmetic drop of this epic looking cloak that the boss actually wears on their model. So if you're looking to mimic the boss and go for the full ethereal look, you could definitely do so. But then you have bosses like the Soul Hunters, which give you boots that actually directly interact with your ratio wraps, empowering them even further. As well as King Saldahar, who has a Maw of the Void, one of the most gorgeous looking maces, literally a black void on a stick that they've ever created. Raids will also be a fantastic source of tier gear that actually have various different offerings, or rather tier tokens, that can drop directly from many of these bosses. And this is like one of the best ways for you to be able to farm tier gear is by running these delves on all the different difficulties. Ideally, when raiding as a guild, you'll be naturally progressing through the difficulties of normal into heroic and potentially mythic into cutting edge. But if you're pugging, for example, then you may need a couple of item levels before you can have an easier time getting into some of those groups. And right now, the ballpark recommended item levels for each of the different difficulties is for you to ideally reach as close as you can to 690 item level for the normal version of the raid. And ideally, in order to get into the normal version of the raid, 680 item level or so, or as high as you can to 685, is recommended before you can really start having an easier time throughout this raid. While for heroic, it's recommended to get around 695 or so before you could really start getting into heroic groups. Generally, the higher item level you have, the better your chances are of getting in the group, but also achievements like getting ahead of the curve or being able to defeat any of the bosses on normal difficulty usually can give you even better chances in order to be able to get into some of these random groups. But pugs are pugs, so definitely groups are not a guarantee by any measure. But if you've been playing the game long enough, you are aware of how the pug world works. Now, if you're gearing for PvP this season, PvP is its own ecosystem. And this got to be mentioned, I think, every single season. When it comes to PvP gear in Season 3, you will only need PvP gear in order to be able to do well within PvP content. You don't need to do dungeons or delves or raids or anything like that. You will want to upgrade your Ratio Cloak, however, because it is still a decent item. But for the most part, you will just need to get PvP gear through PvP content specifically. With this being its own closed ecosystem, you'll simply just be hanging out with all the PvP vendors. And the best way to start off your season will be to get yourself a full set of honor gear, which is going to have a much higher item level than previous season's gear. And I think it's actually worth replacing over the old tier sets from the previous season. From there, you can get some better gear. In order to start upgrading those items is through bloody tokens, which you can get from a weekly quest, but also from a variety of different PvP open world activities in order to farm up this currency, in order to be able to get a variety of different items that could be a solid upgrade for the season. They will scale to item level of 620, which isn't the highest for the season, but they can definitely help fill out many of your slots, though I wouldn't spend them on weapons directly. I actually would spend them on something else at the start of a season. I would actually wait until conquest weapons are available, which they are made available after a little bit of time. After you amass enough conquest for the season, you can just buy these weapons for free. So you don't actually need to spend any currency on them. And conquest gear is going to be the best gear for PvP, as it gives you the most amount of PvP scaling within rated arena and battleground content. It is also worth noting that there's a crafting system for PvP that's also a little bit self-contained. All you need are going to be heraldry of various quality. There's the basic green version, there's the honor gear equivalent version, and then there's the conquest version, and you're able to craft specific PvP gear with this heraldry. In order to be able to fill out certain slots on your gear, like for example, if there's a plate helm for burst mastery and crit versatility, but you want a haste versatility helm, it may be a good idea to actually hard craft one from the crafting resource system, or rather the work order system. To craft one from the work order system. And these items, when you craft them, they don't need to be rank 5. They could literally be rank 1. So as long as somebody can craft the item, it's perfectly fine, as they naturally have this item level scaling of 723 baked into it. So even if it's a rank 1 item, it still is going to have max highest quality available within PvP content specifically. Also, as PvPers, the grind doesn't end there, because you will need some sockets in order to outfit for your PvP gear. However, this can be done as just like an endless grind to be able to collect a bunch of astral jeweler settings in order to be able to outfit every single one of your pieces with additional sockets right as the season launches. So the grind for PvPers is only just begun. Now, a couple of times in this video, I mentioned the Great Vault gearing, and Great Vault is a way for you to be able to collect additional rewards at the end of a weekly run, where the more raid bosses you defeat from the raids and the higher difficulty they are, the more dungeons you complete for the week and the higher difficulty they are, as well as the more devs you complete at higher tiers of difficulty, the various different rewards can show up within the Great Vault. The higher the difficulty, the better are the rewards. With Mythic Plus gear, for example, drop in Mythic Track pieces if you complete dungeons on plus 10 difficulty. And the most dungeons you complete, the more slots you'll be able to open up from the Great Vault. Great Vault is a fantastic source of additional supplemental gear. For those of you with the Mythic rating, that's a source of Mythic Track gear. For Delvers, that maxes Hero Track gear, but some really decent items from there as well. And for Manaforge Omega, normal, heroic, and Mythic is also going to get you equivalent rewards as well. Also, Great Vault is an excellent source of tier gear, as well as every single one of these slots every week could just be a tier piece for your character. So if you're trying to get your tier sets as early as possible for the season, generally filling out the Great Vault with as many slots as possible gives you more chances of potentially tier pieces dropping up on the Great Vault. So ideally at the start of the season, you should try to fill out the Great Vault as much as possible with as many slots as you can. Doesn't really matter what difficulty, just to get as many chances for tier gear for your character. And afterwards, you should definitely try to create more quality slots within the Great Vault, like completing plus 10 dungeons for the week within your dungeon pool, as well as higher tiers of difficulty for raids in order to fill out your slots from your Great Vault with as good, higher quality pieces as possible. Speaking of crafted gear, let's talk about how to make some crafted items for your character. And crafted gear is a fantastic way for you to be able to make supplemental gear, with some additional embellishments, which are nice little bonuses in order to be able to give you a little bit of a gain within PvE or PvP content. But also it's an opportunity to make some guaranteed items with guaranteed stats, and you have a lot more control over the items that you can create when you craft them. Now, the first thing you'll want to do is get enough gilded quests for the season every single week in order to be able to purchase a enchanted gilded ethereal quest if you are crafting an item, which you should be able to do every 2 weeks when the season launches. We already have a spark available day 1, so that should be your first prerogative at the start of the season. And then every other week, you should be able to make a new crafted item that you can upgrade up to a maximum item level of 720, which is 3 item levels below maximum. But still, it offers some of the biggest gains that you can do with guaranteed items that are a guarantee upgrade for your character. So you're able to create a variety of different pieces, and the first item you really should make on just about every character is a weapon. Weapons are massive at the start of the season. With the new spark that you're able to get for the season, the Spark of Starlight, then you can use the reagents in order to upgrade the item to 720 guaranteed, basically giving you a mythic equivalent level weapon day 1 of the season, as long as you're able to cap on your gilded crest for the week. And the best part is you can actually choose the secondary stats on that weapon to be specific. So whatever stats you're looking for, you can guarantee that it has your best stats on that weapon. And then you can infuse it with extra embellishments like lens, for example. Elemental focusing lens is huge. A lot of the weapons use Sigil of Radiance or Ascension being the more popular one right now. Symbiosis is also good in some cases, or Vivacity, but you really need to reference a guide to see which one of these is going to be actually good for your character. But getting a weapon crafted week 1 is generally good for everybody, especially good for classes that are melee classes, because they will scale off of weapons directly for their abilities. But even a lot of the casters and even healers and tanks for some case can actually scale pretty well with the good weapon, or potentially a shield if your class uses a shield as part of day-to-day gameplay. And a final way of gearing out a character will be through the Catalyst, which is making a return in this yet another season. The Catalyst is a way for you to be able to turn some of the Season 3 gear and turn it into tier set equivalent gear. For certain items, it'll actually change those secondary stats and give them that tier set bonus for the 2 set and the 4 set. The only certain slots can get a tier set bonus, however. So like putting a belt in the Catalyst doesn't give you a tier set. Putting boots in the Catalyst doesn't give you a tier set. It can only work for legs, gloves, helm, shoulders, and chest pieces. All other slots can technically still gain some sort of a bonus, like potentially different secondary stats if you look at to min-max your character, but it's also another way for you to be able to get some of the different appearances for the season. Like if you're just trying to farm up all the different seasonal cosmetics and seasonal sets for different looks, Catalyst is another way for you to be able to get some of those looks once you have your character fully geared out for the season. Now with the Catalyst, we'll be able to get 1 charge of Catalyst at the start of the season, and then we'll be able to get a charge every 2 weeks. So ideally by week 3 of the season, you should have 2 Catalyst charges, and if you've gotten 2 tier pieces before that, you should be able to catalyze 2 other items, so now you have a 4 set. This makes it much easier for you to be able to get your 4 set for the season for that big power spike with that tier gear. However, you can also unlock an additional bonus charge of the Catalyst for completing certain seasonal activities. Similar to the Season 2 Master achievement, you either need to attain 1600 or above or PvP rating at the start of the season, or obtain a Ahead of the Curve achievement for the raid content, or get the Keystone Master achievement from Mythic Plus. You'll be able to get yet another charge towards your Catalyst. So potentially during week 1, you could be walking into the season once you complete the Master achievement, which is pretty easy at the start of the season. You should have 2 charges of Catalyst from the get-go. So that's at least 2 guaranteed items that you could turn into tier gear. So then you need 2 more items from either the raid or the Great Vault in order to obtain your 4 set bonus. But be very, very careful when using the Catalyst. These charges, like I said, are available every 2 weeks or every other week. You'll be able to get a charge. So make sure you're not spending it on various random pieces like bracers or boots, helms, shoulders, gloves. Chest and leg slots are the ones that you should focus on at the start of the season. So with that, as always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching, and hope you guys did enjoy this guide. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give this video a like, as I would very, very much appreciate it. Helps out videos reach a wider community. Speaking of a community, join our Discord community, especially if you got any questions regarding Season 3. That's probably the best place to reach me, as well as the rest of our members, especially if you ever want to get into discussions regarding any of the new happenings, whether it is for patch 11.2 or future updates of Midnight. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in our next one.